Thank you for your patience. Today it took about half an hour to get this launch. The go live kept moving forward. And as you may have seen, I'm sitting here waiting to move forward, but the actual picture was not connecting on my side. So hopefully I can cut this off as we move forward. As you've seen, we've rebranded the channel. We came from an idea of pink glue, meaning women need to stick together through all these changes. Now we're coming out the other side of this, and we sure have seen a lot of changes, to say the least. Now, when I last really was pumping out videos, we were talking about the understanding between the difference of vocabulary, misinformation and disinformation. Well, now we're to the other side, which the two most noted words over the last 2 weeks are stop and retarded. Now, where did we get in society that this is how we want to treat each other? But this is a theme I want to talk about this week as we go into Christmas. I want to talk today about I, the one person within yourself, and how this is affecting you and how you affect the world. Tomorrow, I want to move into you or that person over there. So somebody other than the I. And then on the third day, I want to move into they. So the people over there that affect us. And then after that, I want to look into we. What kind of relationships are made in such a way that we work together or we tear each other apart? And then lastly, as we follow up on this, I want to look at how the government plays into this mix. Now, I named today's show Guilty Government, Sorry Charlie. It doesn't look like that stayed, even though I popped it in 4 times, but we'll see when I edit it afterwards. But what does that mean? So as I've talked about the word stop and the word used being retarded, and now we've got a guilty government, how is that linking to where we are today? So welcome back to the channel. We're now talking from a technology standpoint. Technology is my strength. I do have an MBA in finance. I've got many decades here in Silicon Valley, recently working at Google, Apple, and Intuit. And we're just going to launch this with our sleeves rolled up and see what happens. For today's show, it looks like I'm just glad to be going live. So I'm not going to be able to show the different screen shares that I had up. I don't think. We're going to try it as we move along here. But we're going to just do our best to get through this. So what I want to do is talk about I. You know, I had this saying when I was growing up that there's nobody on this planet that loves me more than my mother. And my mother would do anything for me. A phone call and she would get on a flight and be wherever I was. She wouldn't spend money on herself, but would do everything possible to make sure that her children had things that they wanted before they even wanted it. And yet my mother couldn't protect me from this crazy world that we live in. Now, my life story is very unique. I would tell people that I wouldn't wish my life on anybody. And yet from the outside, the life I have is absolutely amazing. I'm very, very blessed, and I'm very grateful to know that I am blessed. And yet the pathway I've traveled on just does not make sense. Now, over the last few years, as people were locked down in their homes and we had channels like YouTube in order to communicate with one another, more and more people are coming out and their stories are oddly similar to mine. But that's not what today is specifically about. Today, again, is about the I. How am I being impacted? And by I don't mean to go down an egotistic rant. That's not what we're going to stop on today. But I mean you, the person who's listening today, the person who is watching this today, as we ramp up this conversation and prepare ourselves to literally grab hold of the reins and run forward as fast as we can in 2026, because it's going to be one of the best business opportunities, environments that we have seen in a long time, we really have to have that mindset. And so when we look at who are you? We go through and we wear the jacket of life so that people can perceive us in our different roles, maybe one color with our kids, maybe another color or cut to go to work. Maybe we hang up our jacket before we go into a studio and put a smile on our face. But we carry around these personas of who we are. But I think what we really need to do is step back a moment and really look at who am I? What are your values? When you were a child, what did you really want to do with your life? And are you doing that now? When you were a child, what was the vision you had for this world? Probably around Christmas time, it was peace on earth. But then we became more aware of the fact that we can't have peace on earth until everybody is living their values and raising their eyes. I cannot have peace on earth, but we together can. But as we look back at that we really need to be able to build a strong foundation. Now, the reason I decided to come out and start talking again is we've got hundreds of thousands of tech employees who have been right-sized over the last few years. This hits hard, and many never recover from it. So we know that if you graduated university, as an example, got an MBA, started that treadmill in a career, you may have been there for 10, 20, 30 years, any of those benchmarks. And yet, as soon as a company right sizes, it is very, very difficult to get that same position into your new company that you're going to start. You usually are down a few rungs. You've got to learn the new ropes. There was a book out there that we read in when I got my MBA, The Ropes to Skip and the Ropes to Know. You got to start over with each culture. And culture is really important here because as we've seen, the deck of cards has been shuffled over this past year. And what do I mean by shuffled? Well, the Tower of Babel came down and everybody was scattered. That doesn't mean that they were prepared to be scattered. And that doesn't mean that the new lands that they found themselves in were prepared to host them. And so as these cultures mixed up, many of us have found us on the wrong side of technology. And I'll go into more specific examples as we go through that. But allegedly, there was an article that came out on Workday, and Workday is a clock-in software you can use for time management, but they also are involved in placing people. And the article I saw, and I say allegedly because I haven't experienced that directly with their platform, but they were screening people over 50 out of the job market. So if you had already hit that age, then the hiring manager couldn't even see that. Now, I did have a meeting just this last month with an executive at Walmart back at headquarters who informed that he had to cut off the applications coming in from a job they had for data analytics because within half an hour or so, they'd gotten over 500 applicants. But his comment to me was, why aren't anybody in the United States applying for these jobs? All the applicants were individuals, happened to be from India, and it happened to be that they were still in India. Now, this isn't a culture question that they shouldn't apply or they weren't qualified, because this individual that I was speaking to as an executive at Walmart was also from India. But he was wondering why in the United States are Americans so lazy that we're not even applying for the jobs? Why is it that we don't have that level of education to apply for the jobs? And why is he forced to use an H-1B visa process in order to fill the roles? Well, as I've investigated and seen, standing in an HR office in a high-tech location, namely Intuit, I was explaining to HR that none of us that were submitting resumes We're even getting a courtesy thank you for applying email, more or less down the pathway of an opportunity. And so we did a test. I stood in the office of HR at headquarters for Intuit. And I went ahead and applied for a role right in front. I said, you pick the role and I'll apply for it right here. She never, ever, ever saw that I applied. Not then, not later. These resume platforms or application tools that companies are using are specifically blocking out individuals with criteria that they don't want. Now, in this case, it's a government issue. It's a situation where the government is subsidizing other countries. Now, somebody, actually a CEO I was talking to today was saying, now, why would they do that? That doesn't even make sense. It's better to have local talent. Well, did it make sense to have open borders? And now that we're in the middle of it, do sanctuary cities really make sense? Does it make sense to harbor criminals? Not that all of them are criminals, but if they're not, they don't need a sanctuary city. That's what it's about. So as we move forward and we look at this process, it's really very, very harmful. Now, why is this harmful? Because let's say that I go into a retraining program. Well, I did this summer. I wanted to test a new model that was out there. And initially I was told that no, they couldn't accept me in the program because I have advanced degrees. I thought that was interesting. What about individual advanced degrees who need to find themselves onto a new or longer career path? So I noted that. And then it happened to be in HR. So the first week I noted everything was DEI. And I noted the conversation was specifically harmful to individuals with my skin color. Well, I've been around a lot, just like you, that there's a moment to speak out and there's a moment to just listen. So I did that. The very next week, this summer, you might remember that the Supreme Court ruled on a case where a female had applied for a role at a company and immediately been told that they would not be hiring her because they were fulfilling a DEI role. Now, she'd been at the company longer. She had higher education and an extensive track record, meaning the experience was there, and she highly desired to do the job. The only difference was her skin color. Now, I thought we'd moved along beyond this decades ago. Now, anybody might give experiences here and there, and that happens. But this is the state of where we're at right now. As a whole, individuals are being set aside specifically due to federally designated discrimination categories, protected status. And so we're seeing this happen more and more. If you, as an individual, if we go back to the I, so we're talking about you in your chair, how has this affected you? So maybe you or a spouse have had challenges getting on that career trajectory. Maybe you couldn't even get into the programs because you didn't have the right skin color to get educated down the right path. Reverse discrimination is discrimination. And I'm never saying that one person should not be hired because of any criteria other than the lack of ability to do the job. But then if you lose your job, that hits your finances. And we know that the number one reason why individuals divorce in this country is because of financial problems. Now, as we move forward, we also see that a number of individuals who get laid off tend to be more introverted. You know, that first week, there may even be a relief or an exhilaration, just excited that they're free. You know, they may have dreamed for decades to have an opportunity to go out on their own. Well, the reality of being out on your own is very, very different than being under the spectrum of a company. And we see this because people are paid a set wage. In the United States, I'd say it'd be between $20,000 and about $90,000 seems to be the sweet spot. But have you ever thought about that? Why is there a cap? Now, there's a number of individuals who make significantly more than that. But again, we know the concept of the 1%. And as I talk about I in this chair, or you being in your chair, are you part of that 1%? Or are you in that designated swing where you're held just below the amount where you could really reach and grab comfortably a new home? Maybe with you and your spouse, dual income. And yet, why is that? All you have to do is have an extra job, an extra income, just a little bit more, and you can live an entirely different lifestyle. But as we go through the education trap, we are taught to be employees. We are taught to only focus and be dedicated to our employer. Yet how many times do we, or I, need to be right-sized until we realize that plan ain't working for me? So as we look at I, and we understand that your family loves you and you've done everything right in your life, and yet there's a challenge facing you. And then we look around and see that companies are restricting hiring of specific classes, that many of which are protected classes. Then you start to see who owns the homes in the neighborhoods. It's a gentrification. Those who have the jobs are the ones who are buying the homes that people are being forced out of. Now, in my area, like probably your area, property taxes are massive. And we have Prop 13 that caps it, although Prop 19 has now kneecapped that. So in one generation, they have wiped out wealth for Californians. As we move forward through this practice, if somebody loses their job and they need to either move their family to a smaller home or out of state, or maybe divorce and split the assets, those that have been given the jobs are the ones who are able to move forward and buy into the neighborhoods. So as I look around, the makeup of my neighborhood is very, very different than where it was even 4 years ago, or specifically a decade ago. And we know that when the changes happened, and we've seen the policies move forward, and we are going to talk about the government's impact moving on all of these decisions. But what about when you have a life map and you want to create a pathway for yourself and your family, and yet when you're running as fast as you can forward and the rug keeps getting pulled out from you and you've got a hook on your back holding you backwards? At some point, that drive, that motivation, that momentum just kind of leaks out of us. Now, it could be around a period of, well, there's a lot of factors at play. Unfortunately, with the added stress and lack of insurance, often people get sick, and it's a whole nother dimension to deal with. So what I want to do then is talk about how we're going to restructure and run ahead. Based on what I looked at of the financials, the economy, and the environment moving forward, and I've been mapping this out for, well, since we went into COVID, we know that this would be the outcome on the other side, April 2026. I really hoped it would never last that long. That's absolutely crazy to me. From 2020, March 13th, 2020, when the world closed down and Santa Clara County government turned on themselves. But here we are, 2025, rounding the corner to 2026. So based on what I've been studying, this is the time for you to run. Take this period of a couple weeks with your family. If you're in a job, kind of tidied up what you've got, but you're going to want to shift your focus a little bit. come that first week of January, hit the ground running. And if you need help, reach out to me. I'll help structure. I'm a genius when it comes to building businesses from the ground up, so we can help launch that. But what we want to do is make sure that you take January, February, and March to create all your assets, to create the format for a business, and to really focus on the I. Focus on your dreams, because seriously, in this world right now, with so many billions of people, whatever your dreams are, you can build that into a business and help other people that with similar mindset launch their dreams. And you can get paid for it. It's absolutely amazing what opportunities we have in this world right now. And especially with AI, the idea of a solopreneur, well, that really makes a lot of sense. And so again, January, February, and March are structure times. 3 months, that's 90 days. You want to create a roadmap for yourself. And this is your escape plan. This is your opportunity to get out from under an employer who quite honestly doesn't care about you. Realistically, the C-suite, even if you're in it, doesn't really know you and your family. And this is your chance to create generational wealth as you move forward. It's really an awesome time. And so if we go back to talking about we've really been mixed up over the last few years. So I used 2 words at the beginning. I used the word stop and retarded. Now, for years, I've been told we don't use that word. But there's other words too I've been told that we never use. And yet they're throwing them around in society right now. And I'd always explain to my son that good almost always wins over evil. And I say almost because if we look at the battles, they can go either way, but the major wars are won by good. And it's not necessarily that good outsmarts. It's often the fact that evil turns on itself. Evil is evil. They lie, cheat, steal, and they attack themselves. They attack one another, and they erode their own foundation. Eventually, they wipe themselves out. Now, what we're seeing right now, especially play out on the Amethyst stage, is those that we thought were in a particular or on a particular pathway are really turning against each other as well, weeding themselves out. Right now, I would say that TPUSA is captured. I saw the comment hijacked out there. And I absolutely have to agree with that. I don't understand why anybody went to Amethyst, noting the massive money laundering that is happening right now. And we are seeing it live. And yet this is the word stop comes from. Typically, we want to solve questions. We want to solve investigations. We want to know what happened. And some people are curious. I'm not a FOMO person. I could really care less about missing out on somebody else's game. But we do want to solve a problem so that, one, we stop it from happening again, and 2, we expose the darkness. When the lights go on, the darkness is pushed out. You don't have both at the same spot. And it's been very interesting that we know in this case that there has been an immense amount of lies from the beginning. So what do we do with that? So when you and I are sitting in our own chairs and we're talking about I again, one of the biggest manipulations I learned from school, and we're talking kindergarten, first grade, was that you are your word. You're only as valuable or as whole as the integrity of your word to yourself. Now, many people will give their word to other people, but they won't follow up on themselves. And now what we know is something like beginning of the year, a New Year's resolution. How many individuals make a promise to themselves that they're going to do something for that year? Well, nobody does anymore, right? Nobody says for this year, I'm going to do this. They might say for the next 3 months, or a set goal of maybe a weight goal or a fitness goal, nutrition goal, new business goal. It's a set period of time. And then shiny object comes in, they forget about it, and their word to themselves is taken back. This is crucial as we move forward and you're building your pathway. That I is key. You are the center here. You need to make sure that you're making an agreement with yourself that you can hold, because businesses don't disappear because of a lack of money, ever, or a lack of employees, or a lack of technology, or you can go down the list of all the reasons you think that a business might disappear. There's only one reason and one reason only: when the founder walks away. As long as the founder is holding a dream and dedicated to birthing that new business and nurturing that business will continue to thrive. Now, just like anything, with time, it'll grow and expand and add more to this world. But in the meantime, what does it mean? Let me see if I can pull this up here. I don't want to just let me see if I can share this. If it will share, I don't know. And I still have the OBS up. We were trying to get that to connect, and it's not going our way. So I'll try this one more time and see. I pulled up some different tabs already, and yet it looked like, let's go over here. Okay, and let's go back here. I'm going to see if this will share so we can. Okay, it looks like this is going to do. I'm not going to hook up audio right now. Let's just see if we can come to here. Okay, I'm hoping that you can see my screen here. Now, I just chose one of them, right? I know that CBS is having a huge blowout right now because the 60 Minutes show was held back as an executive decision. And we know that Larry Ellison, I believe, is the one who recently bought CBS. And we've got Barry Weiss, head of CBS. And after the crappy show that they did last week with Erica Kirk and Barry Weiss, that was just massive propaganda. There's nothing around that. But what we want to do is look at some of the information here. So live coverage. President Trump announces plan for new battleships, the largest we've ever seen. Well, what do you do with that? First of all, you want to know whether or not that's believable. Well, if it is believable, in President Trump announcing plan for battleships is telling us that there's a ton of money going into military contracts right now. That's what that says to us. So if you are in your chair and you're launching a business, what can you do to support this growth? And when I worked at the government, we would call it the people who were eating at the trough. It's massive, the amount of money. And we just saw that because TriggerSmart, let me see if I can pull up that one right here. TriggerSmart has reviewed for us this theory right here, the Mike theory. And it's not his theory, it's John Bray. You can see the name lit up right here in the middle of the screen. But in this world, we've seen that there's nothing free. So when we talk about I again, and I keep wanting to go back to that, if you're getting Obamacare insurance, it's not free. Somebody's paying for that. Mainly, somebody who has a job is paying into that system so that other people can have it at a discounted rate. So when you were on the job side of working, you are paying for that. Now maybe you're on the side of needing Obamacare, and you find out that somebody else has to work to pay into it to pay that low subsidy. It's not free. When you go somewhere and they say, hey, you can get your free vaccines or cold or flu vaccine this year, it's not free. Somebody else is paying for that, and it's paying through the premium. Now, 3 years ago, I paid more money in taxes than what I actually earned. And individuals who say that that doesn't even make sense are telling me they don't know how the world works. So, as you know, sitting in your chair, you earn some money. The first thing you have to do with that money is pay taxes, a whole bunch of different levels of taxes. Maybe a state tax, a federal tax, maybe a Medicare tax, maybe a Social Security tax, all of that. And then in this country, healthcare has become a mandatory tax. In states like California, you still have to have medical insurance, which has driven up the cost and reduced the ability to get good care. So what that means is that's another tax. Now, if you own a home, you're paying property taxes, and right there can blow any salary out of the water because property taxes have gone through the roof. And that can be in a number of states right now. In fact, many people lost their home just a couple of years ago because they said their mortgage payment adjusted. And for many of them, even on a fixed interest rate mortgage, it was not because the interest rate shifted. It's because there was a reevaluation of the property. And if you watch Mitch over at Real Estate Mindset, again, that's Real Estate Mindset, Mitch, he goes into all the details and the theft that these local communities are using to leverage higher priced homes and how it is a scam. And in who is part of that, the contractors and builders collude in order to suck money out the back end, causing additional property tax increases to give more money as a pass through to contractors. And who is complicit in the middle are the school districts. Most school districts across the United States are completely broke. They haven't put away the money. They haven't actually bought down the bonds. And when people start losing their jobs and can't pay their property taxes or stop paying sales tax, another form of taxation, or in California, insurance on vehicles, all these taxes add up. But when people don't have the money to pay that anymore, the school districts suffer. And you can't hurt the children, right? It's the same thing. When they need money, oh, it's about the children. Oh, it's about the fire trucks. Oh, you can't close this hospital. People need it. And yet the expansion and the waste built up these programs that should not have been built up to begin with. So John Bray exposed this. These two YouTube shows are the same, right? This one he abbreviated to really get down to the meat of what they're talking about. And again, he highlighted John Bray here. John Bray is big on X from what I hear. And so he came on to this channel with Trigger Smart in order to answer questions. Now, interestingly enough, the audience asked, is this guy telling the truth? He seems really nervous. Well, yeah, he did seem really nervous. He kind of seems like a little bit of an introvert. He's extremely knowledgeable. He has patents. He understands the space, and he doesn't use a YouTube channel. But he was very clear and direct with his answers, carrying the receipts, as we call it now. So if you want more information here, but the bottom line is he's able to point out a pathway that makes more sense than within the first 33 hours we were given and then told to stop. That's not the way this world works. Unfortunately, this pathway that John Bray has spoken about brings up a lot of information and a lot of questions. So do you remember in October in Tennessee, there was a explosive plant that got wiped off the planet? I mean, the whole thing is down to dirt. The buildings are gone. And very sadly, 16 people lost their lives. Well, apparently they were at the trough. They took a government contract. They took a contract and accepted it from May 1st to October 25th of 2025 for sub $450,000. It was about $440 to create an anti-personal device, very small, very, very small, a short-term closed contract. Now, I haven't dug through the contract and who authored it yet, but we do know that it was the DoD that signed off on it. And for anybody who wants to learn more information about government contracts, you can go to sam.gov and start digging around yourself. sam.gov is run by GSA, General Services Administration, which really owns and manages all the assets for the United States. So any buildings, any fleet vehicles, anything that has to do with that core infrastructure is GSA. And what GSA has created is what they call a Sears catalog. So they go out and find contractors, put them in this catalog, and then when government individuals need to buy something, they can flip through the catalog, and a small percentage goes back to GSA for their service, and the rest is bought directly off the shelf. But of course, with sam.gov, you can identify opportunities for individual contracts, and you can see the awards. When I tried to go through this earlier, it was requiring a sign-in for me to go any further. So I'll have to explore how they've updated right now. There were some headlines across the top here saying that they had recently updated it. And so I don't want to take too much time here, but sam.gov. As we move forward, you can find key websites that'll answer your questions. And as we look back, where was that one again? Here we go. John Bray had highlighted that this organization, AES it was called, Accurate Energetic Systems, I believe, the explosive company that exploded, had this government contract. Well, it sure is interesting. So for any of us who have read maybe like a John Grisham novel, remember the first many books that came out? They were really in page, you just couldn't wait to get to the next page. You wanted to know what was happening next, the twists and turns in the stories. This is really what we're getting right now from Candace as she goes through step by step by step of all the things that she says are just weird. Now, some people love her. Some people are really on the other end of that. But she's bringing up some key questions. And I think it's questions that we should all be asking, not out of a fear of missing out, but getting to the truth. Because if we go back to the I that this conversation is about today, life is not just about them over there or supporting them or doing volunteer work you've got to figure out your own house. Without a strong foundation, you're just going to get blown over when the storm comes. And how many times do we need to get blown over before we realize we better put our feet on stronger foundation? So stop. Stop was what was told when she was asking questions, and it's still being told to her. How dare she ask questions? And she's saying, how dare you not ask questions? And to anybody who's trying to suppress the information, the question is why? Why don't you want the truth to come out? Because as we explore tech reality on this channel, we're going to see more and more how technology is not our friend. Now, we're going to talk a lot about technologies that can help us. And as I mentioned, to be a solopreneur. But we're also going to talk about a lot of problems out there. And the technology is used to keep you in shape while somebody is managing masses rather than one-on-one. So where do we go from here? As I mentioned, 2026 is going to be one of the most phenomenal opportunities you're going to have in your lifetime. Now, how do we know ramping up to this? Well, we know that during the during the last few years, we did not have the explosion of the dot-com era again because of regulations. Companies could not get their company over the goal line of going public. Now, if you're coming back here to Silicon Valley conversation and looking at venture capital, the difference between a small business, mom and pop, and a startup is really a relationship between a venture capitalist that forces growth at scale. And the only exit for those who onboard massive cash through venture capitalism is an IPO. There isn't another exit strategy because there's so much invested along the way that all that money has to be paid off one way or another. So if we take a step back and we look at Uber. Now, what was his? Travis Kalanick, I think his name was. What was interesting about Travis is he, let me see if I can pull that up right now. Kalanick. So, when Travis had this idea, he was actually in a room, co-working space, right? People who are entrepreneurs come into this area, and they want to. Let me see if I can come back here. They want to work together so that they have the energy of others there while they're building their own startups, hearing about funding opportunities and coaching and mentoring and sharing spaces. So he was in a space with another individual that he kept telling had a really bad idea. The whole idea was really bad until the point that guy quit. That's the only way a business goes away, is if the founder gives up. Travis didn't give up. He took that idea and immediately started selling it as the Uber of everything. Uber ice cream, Uber restaurant, Uber everything. Everything was going to be Uber under this mass umbrella. The one thing that Travis didn't want to do was ever pay people like you and I sitting in our chairs, to drive for Uber. He never wanted to do that. But the problem is, the software and the public policies were not in place to have autonomous vehicles yet. So he figured out, as a means to an end, he would go ahead and work with people like you and I and allow us to drive around in our own cars, wear and tear, our own time, to get a little pocket change. Now, there's a lot that went into this process. And that pocket change ended up, I think it was AB5 in California, that the state bill that came forward in order to stop these rideshare companies from manipulating individuals and using them as independent contractors rather than employees. Well, what it ended up doing was kneecap the trucking business, where you could no longer be an independent contractor truck driver, you had to work through a trucking company in California, which forced truckers to either become employees, which they did not want, or to leave the state. And yet somehow Uber and Lyft sued and got out of the whole AB and left the rest of the industry stuck. Now, what is interesting as we go down this path is Uber was there to use you and I. Well, what is the difference between any other company that's out there? As they set up the ultimate pyramid scheme, where you have the executives at the top of the pyramid and people like you and I at the bottom of the pyramid, and they just flood the bottom of the pyramid every once in a while so that they can bring in new employees. What about you? What about your brand? What about the relationships that you built? Well, if you built any in marketing or sales, you built them for the company, not for yourself. What about your brand? Well, you didn't build your brand. But it's very easy now with LinkedIn and Twitter and Twitch and TikTok and YouTube to build your own brand so that people know you. So you're creating a bridge from one job to the next. You have to have you, the brand. So as we look at I in this chair, what's it going to be? As we move forward, well, what's his name? Victor Davis Hanson, I think his name was, once said, there's two doors in life. And if you choose the door marked security, you are guaranteed to lose everything. But if you choose the door to freedom, the whole world is yours. This is a decision point that you have right now to look at your life, focus on I, and see what you can do. If in fact you've been right-sized, or if you were to step back from the company for a little while, maybe you could take a sabbatical, but use that time to hit the ground running and build the ultimate business and generational wealth for you and your family. So let me go back over here to this screen and see, looks like it's, okay, so that didn't work so well. Let me try this here. Okay, so let me see if this one will open up one more time here. So once again, if we look at this, look, the title's changed. Trump promises golden fleet of battleships as he pushes biggest show of Navy power yet. Now look at this. This is the first story here. Do you know how often you see a title here? And then once you click on it, the article is a totally different direction. Well, in this case, they've even updated the title. So they had an A and B, or A to Z, who knows what it was. They decided who's getting which one is getting the most clicks, and they've now replaced it with this. Now, the underlining article is probably the same, but you can tell when you get into the URL that the titles have shifted. Let's go down a little bit more. President Trump says, I don't like seeing so many in those photos. You know, we're still talking about the same conversation, and we talk about truth and I. If you're not involved with this, it's time to have heads down and focus on building your own. These games, politics, as Trump says, it all comes from open casting. It's a big show. And people are policies. These people get themselves in place and they push through the policies. Right now, it's time to focus on building up you and your family. We've gone through a lot over the last few years. It's time to move through the tunnel, come out the other side. And they say, make hay when the sun is shining. And this is the time we're at. Now, here we have Sanders doubles down after a legal group tries to reverse Christmas holiday for workers. Let's go ahead and pause and talk about this one for a moment. A couple of years ago, I was in Intuit's lobby, and I asked security to take my picture next to one of many, but an absolutely beautiful, beautiful Christmas tree. It was a tree, and it had white little lights on it. That's all, nothing else. Just absolutely beautiful. Let me see, I hear that something's coming out here. Let me just quiet this. And then the very next day, I walked back into the headquarters building, and I was joking with security. I said, how is it that the tree's gone? And I actually joked that because I thought, did we not take my picture yesterday with the tree? And let me see if we can. And they said, yes, it was taken down because it was offensive. Well, that tells me that that's just not a decision that you or I make. Somebody at the top of the company who was new decided no more Christmas trees. You couldn't talk about anything Christian or anything Jewish. You couldn't talk about anything that wasn't Indian or Chinese holidays. And they filled those holidays left and right. But here in America, where we're kind and open and celebrate everything for everybody and appreciate it, all of a sudden, no more Christmas trees. And so this is really what we were seeing here with Sanders. So let me pull this back up, getting the hang of this here. So Governor Sanders rejects demand from legal group to undo Christmas closure. And she says, I will do no such thing. But look at this. The organization is a fighting organization. Their whole purpose in being, their whole mission, and the title of their or the name of the company, nonprofit, no doubt, the Freedom from Religion Foundation. So if we look into it, and I'm just not going to take my time, but I'm sure that that's some kind of a 501c3 nonprofit organization. They take in donations and lobbyists, and they go after, in this case, a government office or a government entity to tell them, no Christmas for you. Haven't we seen that movie? So you and I can form an organization, the Freedom from Religion Foundation. We can form the Christmas Foundation. We can form the I don't know, for the Battleship Foundation. There's a lot of different foundations that can be created. Many of them, as we've seen, are money laundering. But in this case, all they do is go after organizations and stop them from celebrating Christmas in a Judeo-Christian country. So the issue is she wants to close the office on Friday, December 26th, to celebrate Christmas and give employees more time with their families. And this organization said, no, they don't want to do that. And luckily, we've got somebody who's willing to stand up. Now, let's see if there's anything else on this page real fast that we should look at. Okay, disclosure. Disclosure is massive. It looks like 2026 is going to be a massive year of disclosure. And what does that mean? Disclosure of what? Do you remember in December of 2018, we got a lot of information that told us there's a lot more there. I think that's about the time that To the Stars came out. That's definitely the time that Trump made a proclamation. And as we saw, that's when we got introduced to, I think, Luis Elizondo. and really came to grab hold of Skinwalker Ranch. All of these going in these directions. This is also the wind behind the Y files, as he's studying and learning more and really pushing out information, standing on the shoulders of those who carried the weight forever. So we've got Camelot, we've got David Wilcock, we have Linda Moulton Howe, I think her name is. We've got all these Richard Greer, I think it is, Dr. Richard Greer. We've got all these individuals who have carried the water to get the information out. Now, from a Christian perspective, we're told that these are angels and demons. What is out there? Well, we know that the military has such advanced technology way beyond what you and I are aware of. And we saw the pager takedown that that was used not too long ago. Seems to be the same scenario that the DOD ordered through AES. And then after the delivery and after the usage of the delivery, it was the same effect on the body. Then somehow that entire company got taken down, erased from the planet. It's gone. There's no footprint there anymore. So this is going to be interesting in 2026, what comes out. Now, as you also remember, wasn't it a year and a half ago, not this last summer, but the summer before that, where I think it was New Jersey was talking about all of the drones, the SUV-sized drones. And I think it was about a year ago summer when somebody did the hoax in Florida with the aliens at the mall. So we're going to get quite a bit of hoax and stories and mockery where it takes us away from learning the truth. What is wrong with the truth? So on that report, I did want to, since we came here already, let me use this one again. Who was Redacted? Did you guys see the show last week, Redacted? Let me actually do this here. Okay, so Redacted YouTube. This is with Clayton and Natalie Morris. Okay, now we're going to go after LASIK, I guess. Okay, again, why can't we just have the truth? Why does it have to be about manipulation and ultimately about money? Okay, what I wanted to look at here was, he did a live last week, and it was a two-part. Let's see here. We can just go here, pull it up. It's interesting. Let's see. Get ready. Tyler Putin, Unthinkable. And I'm sorry, I'm looking through here. It wasn't 2 weeks ago. It was last week. 4 days. Thinkable. Where did it go? Look, it's just a minute here. More. I'm sorry. That's really not that crazy. Okay, so somebody by the name of JP came on the channel, and it was a two-part series. And what he did was he talked about, try one more time here, disclosure. And he talked about from his first person what he has experienced, what he has seen. And Yeah, interesting. I don't see it right here. That was last week, parts 1 and 2. I think one of them was released on the 20th, and I don't remember which one. But we're getting disclosure. And I think the main reason why we're able to have disclosure on this level is because of channels like YouTube. If we went back, a couple decades ago, you'd always kind of wish to be a fly on the wall. If only you knew. If somebody was negotiating, if only you could be a fly on the wall and know what the negotiation is, so you could come out and win the day, get the bigger paycheck, get the contract. And now there's a lot of things that we know, but we don't have the evidence in our hands. And YouTube, with discernment, is giving that opportunity for us to pull through and find the evidence that other people are sharing. Now, I think those are some of the cores I wanted to talk about today. So again, this episode is really about I, and that's interesting, the I there. Let me get back over here. And so this is a long way around to figure out where are we at as we're ready to run forward. And again, reach out to me if you're looking for any guidance as you're structuring the next 90 days. We can sort through ideas. We can sort through practicality. You can sort through, you'd be surprised what resources you already have. You just didn't maybe know it or pull it together. So as you gather your information and you run forward, it's really an amazing time for you to sit in your chair and understand what your values are, what your integrity is, what your vision is, what it would mean to you to absolutely set up generational wealth for yourself and not another company, not another time that you're going to get right sized or pushed out, or be the one that's able to stay in the company but pull the load now of an entire department that was let go. There's a lot of opportunities here for all of us going into 2026. I really wish you the best. Now, again, today was focusing on I. The conversation was really getting you to wake up to who you are so that we can move forward. Tomorrow, we're going to focus on you. So I, you in your chair here and we're going to focus on somebody other than you and how that impacts your life. And we're going to talk about that from many different perspectives and why that's important in our community and how the you impacts the I. Okay, you have a wonderful day today, and we'll go ahead and touch base tomorrow and build on this idea as we roll out how we're going to structure 2026 with a plan, with motivation, and with integrity. All right, have a wonderful evening.